level of revenue than before those increases. Census included for customers to consume today per year. That cost and that price is 220% of what it was just 3 years ago. So that is a very large increase in our cost. We have to purchase trucks, backhoes, treatment plant equipment, and replace that when it wears out. And we're seeing since 2020, those prices have gone up 30% or more. And the last component has to do with capital improvements. As we're going to find out tonight, we have a profound need to construct a lot of projects to fix existing problems in our system, capacity-wise, and to replace aging and failing infrastructure. So that is one increase in and of itself. The other part is that the cost for constructing capital improvement projects is up over 75%, and for pipes, over 100% increase of what it was just 3 years ago. So the trend here is, yes, we do have significant operating cost increases, but the dominant factor is the debt service to pay for those capital improvements. We will not be cash funding those projects. We would typically be taking out loans that we would pay back over 20 to 30 years. And so the green bars here represent the debt service, basically the loan payments that we would be making on those loans.
There was a question that asked, what is the capital improvement plan and how will it benefit me? But as you can see, he answered it. I just want to make sure that we address that question. And it was addressed. Another question, why conduct a rate study?
Well, we need to go back to that other question. I think that's the next one we need to tee up here. It's really important to understand, because our capital infrastructure plan has to act on a rate study, it really deserves some attention to understand the need, why we need those capital improvements. And so those issues you can see graphically here. We do have severe capacity limitations. We do have water mains that break frequently. Old asbestos cement pipe is the source of most of our breaks in our water system. We have sewage overflows and manholes that back up into the streets and even into homes when we have heavy rainstorms. One of the things that we have to do operationally that should never have to happen, we have 62 lift stations out there. When we get a heavy rainstorm, our crews go out and they will selectively turn off some lift stations to prevent overloading where those lift stations are pumping to. That's to prevent overflows downstream. But you can't keep that up, otherwise your lift station itself that you turned off will overflow. So our crews have to go out there and turn those back on and find others to turn off. And that is a situation that is far, far below the standard that the state has established for how our sewer system should work. And then we have visible deterioration of infrastructure. And you have a slide here where we've got a fractured clay pipe. This was in our system that was replaced by a project, but there are many more like it. We conducted a master plan, started it in 2019, it was finalized in 2020, and it revealed a number of observe problems, you can observe an overflow, but by looking at something, you can't tell exactly why it's happening. We're talking about underground infrastructure. So hydraulic models are really essential, and this is the output from our sewer model. We spent considerable time and effort to calibrate that model so that it would give us accurate results. What we're seeing here are red dots representing sewer overflows that would occur during the design rainstorm, about 4 inches falling in 6 hours. Yellow is what we're considering severe surcharge, not overflowing, but within 3 feet of the surface. The capacity of the system isn't enough, and so the sewer becomes pressurized and begins to rise within a manhole. This is not a good situation. So the master plan also developed a series of projects, and it identified them by priority and when we would need them. And you can see that there are more wastewater projects on this plan than there are water. In that first 5 years, about 68% of the cost would be dedicated toward the sewer system. And we have posted that capital improvement plan and these key maps onto our rates webpage. And so the numbers here indicate the number of project, more or less by priority within a group. This is for wastewater. We also have one for water. So if you want to learn more about that, you can tune in or visit our website and read more about it. That is that question. Thank you.
The first one I'm going to read is, what local and out-of-state companies will be profiting from this proposed $250 million infrastructure? Number 2, we'd like to see each line item spelled out on a map of proposed infrastructure. What is being prioritized?
Well, we did answer that second question in the previous slide, so that is now available for all customers to go check out on our website. The first part of that question has to do with who is profiting from this capital improvement plan. Harlingen is a department of the city, even though it has financial separation and accountability. We do have to follow the same rules that all municipalities in Texas have to follow, and that is capital projects, construction projects have to be bid out, and we have to award it to the lowest responsible bidder. And so that's no different. We cannot pick and choose the contractors to do our jobs.
Did HWWS pursue any other alternatives to a rate adjustment?
Indeed, once our master plan was finalized, we began submitting many of our projects to the Texas Water Development Board, the agency who does the administration of federal and state loans and grant programs. And I think I need a different slide here. There we go. And so based on that effort, we have been successful in securing a $10 million commitment for a low interest loan that we anticipate closing sometime in November of this year. Another application that we have been invited to submit and we would expect to close also in November is an $18 million package, 9 of which would be grant money that Waterworks would not need to repay, and then a $9 million low interest loan. Other components here, the EPA has mandated that we conduct surveys of customer sewer pipes, or I'm sorry, water pipes, where we have uncertainties or don't have data to rule out the possibility that they could be lead. Lead has been a big focus of removing those. And so there has been a federal program that requires or that offers 51% grant funding for such projects and a 0% loan for the remainder. And so that is a total that is about $1.7 million that we anticipate receiving over the next couple years. And just this past March 1st, we submitted $191 million worth of projects to the Texas Water Development Board. We don't anticipate being successful with all of them. Projects are prioritized according to certain criteria, and some projects just aren't going to meet that. But that doesn't mean we can't do them. We just have to go and look at general revenue bonds, typically at higher rates, higher cost of money, but we can proceed with our master plan even without some of those subsidies. Now, the success that we have with those loan and federal grant programs is going to allow us to reduce the rates in future years. We have a proposed rate for 2024, but we aren't going to really know about our success. In future years, as we experience that success, we can certainly report and recalculate, and if a rate decrease at that point in time is warranted, then we'll consider it.
This is also a two-part question. Question number one, why am I just hearing about this now? Question number two, do customers have a say-so and request not to increase rates?
So, it is a little bit of a discouraging question considering the amount of time that has been expended to try and get information out. Harlingen Waterworks Board of Trustees and the Harlingen City Commission have met in five joint meetings starting in November. I had another meeting in December, another one in January, and two in February. And those meetings were posted and comments were solicited and encouraged. The city also had town hall meetings in each of the districts, and the rate plan and our rate study was a central feature to each of those town hall meetings, and we did receive comments from a lot of citizens. There were 5 of those, and even in the last month, there have been a couple city commission meetings that have talked about certain aspects of the rate plan. So there has been a lot of effort out there. We're also trying to get the word out through this information session. And the time for submitting comments and questions is not over. And we would encourage customers to log on to our website, our rate page, and to continue submitting your comments and questions. What Waterworks is going to do is to take all those comments, compile them, and to make sure that our City Commission and our Board of Trustees have an opportunity to hear them before deciding to adopt any rate plan. Also, point out that the City Commission and Waterworks, City Commission specifically has not made any decisions yet on the rate increase. We do anticipate that there are going to be some City Commission meetings that will consider an ordinance in the month of April, and the earliest that a rate plan might be adopted would be May 1st. That is a possibility, but it's not decided, and there's some elements of that rate plan that have not yet been finalized. So comments and questions certainly are still asked for and solicited. We've done also quite a bit of additional work in addition to our website. We did overhaul our website. We have the rates page where we have a lot of information. We do have the draft rate study report. It's 125 pages. Might be a little bit dry for some, but if you want to know the details, we also have a number of presentations that we've been giving along the way. The latest information is available on that site, so we would encourage customers to check it out. Also launched an X account and a Twitter account, and we've been posting to those to increase our customer and community engagement. So please stay tuned for what we're posting on social media.
And a question, HWWS rates are high as it is right now. A lot of people are struggling financially. So other than the rate increase, if customers don't pay the bill by the due date, an additional fee is added. Will additional days be added to make the payment before they disconnect water? Currently, they only provide 10 days.
This is our example of our web page and the different documents. Sorry to backtrack there. To answer the question about rates being high, actually Harlingen Waterworks rates are the lowest cost rates for the typical residential users in the Rio Grande Valley, and this chart shows that the typical annual cost, somewhere around $592. Every other water utility, city or water supply corporation charges or has a higher cost than Harlingen Waterworks does right now. That's not to minimize the impact of water and sewer services, but in a relative sense, when you consider the context of where we're at, our rates right now are the lowest, and they've been among the lowest for many years. Has to do with payment deadlines, and we have conducted an investigation into the billing policies and due dates. When we issue a bill, the customer has 20 days to pay. If they pay after that, there is a late payment penalty. And then if it's beyond 10 days of that due date, that customer is subject to disconnection. And that really is no different. That's very similar to what other utilities do in the valley. I think if you delay and give more time to pay that bill, it doesn't reduce the obligation. It just shifts it perhaps in the early phase, but I think customers would find themselves in the same situation. It doesn't change the amount of the bill. Thing that I think has to be said, in 2022, we partnered with Community Action Corporation of South Texas, or KCOST, and that is an agency that administers federal funds to help customers who are subject to disconnection. Customers who have already passed their due deadline and they don't have the financial resources to pay. This program will actually investigate whether those customers are eligible for that program. To date, there's been over $100,000 in assistance to those qualifying customers that Harlingen Waterworks has been able to connect customers with through this program. If you want to learn more about that, please contact our customer service.
And will the rates go up, and how much?
Well, this is the question that I think everybody wants to know about. And so I think we need to talk about our rate plan. This page, this image, contains the entirety of the rate plan in terms of what bills and what is to be charged. What makes up the bill are the base rates, as we talked about, but there are also volumetric rates based on the consumption. So the meter size is one component. Typically, if you're 5/8 inch, there's one schedule, but if you have bigger meter, your base rate's going to be higher. There's a base rate that is charged for water and also for sewer. What is a new feature about our rate plan is the block rate. And there's a couple things that this achieves. It does achieve a conservation objective, but it also has an affordability component. And so this is to say that if you consume 3,000 gallons or less, you will be charged at a rate that is about 40 cents lower than the current rates per 1,000 gallons. If you consume more than 3,000 gallons and less than 10,000, the amount that's over 3,000 gets assessed a different rate, and what's over 10,000 to 20,000 is yet a higher rate, and then above 20,000 is the highest of the rates. And those customers who are those big consumers are going to get a price signal, and they're going to have a motivation to conserve water. So that is one of the factors. Another factor that's involved is that many of our economically disadvantaged customers are typically your lowest consumers, and so they are going to see the advantage of this lower rate. And that's what a block rate plan does. Harlingen has not had this, but this is by far more common than it isn't. It may be that Harlingen is the only one in the Rio Grande Valley who doesn't have some degree of a block rate type of a plan. On sewer, same type of situation. Your base charge is determined based off of the meter size, but in this case, there is one rate that is charged to all residential and commercial. There is not a block rate on the sewer side of things. So calculating your water and sewer bill, I think we could spend some time here, but it is your water base rate, your sewer base rate. We talked about those. This is a formula that you can use. Water that's within that 3,000 gallon range gets charged that first rate, and so forth. The sewer commodity is a bit different, and many customers don't realize that Harlingen Waterworks is a winter averaging utility, and there are no others in the valley who do that. And the premise is that we look at the 3 coldest months of the year in the wintertime, December, January, and February, and we take that average and we establish that as the cap on the volume you will be charged, even in the summer. So if you're using 10,000 gallons in the summer, but you only use 4,000 gallons in the winter, your sewer bill is not going to be charged at 10,000, it's going to be charged at that 3,000. If you use less than your winter average, you'll only be charged that lower. And so that explains that, I think, a little bit more. I think the other component here we need to talk about has to do with the cost for a typical customer. Every customer's use pattern is going to be different, how much they might use in the winter versus the summer. But in a typical scenario where you've got 4 months of your low use at about 5,000 gallons, 5 months at 10,000 gallons, and then 3 months at 15,000 gallons, this is the profile of cost that you would be looking at. 592 are current rates compared against all the others. And over time, in 2026, we're showing another increase there, and then in 2028. And I think the video described it really well. Right now, and even in 2026, our rates are going to be the lowest in Cameron County for this use case. By 2028, even though this rate looks like a big rate, it is still going to be less cost than most other utilities in Cameron County. That doesn't minimize to say that it's a small rate, but in the context of where we are and the cost that we incur, that is not an excessive position to be in.
Why has Harlingen Waterworks waited so long to start a huge overhaul sewer project when it could have been done in phases, maybe cutting the giant increases in rates?
The plan is phased in over a 5-year period, but some of the background on that, Harlingen Waterworks had a focus for about 10 years on improving water and wastewater treatment facilities. And that phase completed in 2017. Then we turned our focus to conveyance. And we hadn't done a master plan for a long time, maybe as long as 20 years, using those sophisticated hydraulic models. When we went through the master plan, we then began to realize how big of a magnitude of the problem we had, especially in our sewer system. And so that is one factor. The other factor, which I think is even more significant, is that our master plan had its basis on 2020 cost data for construction. And what we discovered when we got into the rate plan, we wanted to make sure that our capital improvement plan was reflecting current rates so that it wouldn't be under collecting the revenues or undercharging the revenues we needed. So let me get my notes here. So the reality is that we ended up talking to our master planning consultant about what our costs would end up being with the inflation that had happened. And we discovered, as we talked about before, that costs had doubled in our construction costs. So our master plan costs had essentially doubled. And in 3 years, half of our rates that we're proposing are associated with that inflation factor. So when you talk about having spread things out over time, the acceleration in terms of what we needed for rates really happened much more recently than we had ever anticipated. Certainly the pandemic had a big factor on that, but I think that is the best answer that we can give to that question.
Why are discounts being considered for low-income customers?
Well, our leaders have been very concerned about affordability from the very beginning of the rate study. And some of what we're doing with the rate plan and the block rates, that low block rate, does have an affordability component to it. But another initiative that the City Commission has asked for is to consider perhaps some discounts for customers who are least able to afford it. Harlingen Waterworks doesn't collect data on customers' financial situation, so we wouldn't have a good way to ensure that a customer is misrepresenting their situation. However, customers who go to Harlingen Housing Authority go through a process of showing what their income level is, and that authority certifies what their status is before that they give them assistance, either through housing that the authority has or through certificates that they give for Section 8 housing. So the City Commission has considered a discount for those customers that has been considered in the rate plan. And so that has not yet been decided upon formally, but it is one of the goals that the City Commission has identified to help those types of customers.
Fiction. New car wash businesses in Harlingen are partly to blame for the rate increase?
Well, that would be fiction. One of the aspects of the rate study and our current rates is that it is following the guidelines of the American Water Works Association on rate setting, and that ensures that the rates that are charged to customers are in proportion to the cost that those same customer classes exert on the system. So the bottom line is that a car wash pays its own way. There are no other customers that are subsidizing. There is no part of our rate plan that is associated with car washes, so that is definitely a fiction.
The rate increase is too high. Why not add a fixed charge of $5 to everyone's bill instead?
Well, a $5 increase on the bill is going to fall far short of what we need to cover those operating cost increases. And perhaps we could do fewer capital improvement projects, but that number of projects we would be able to finance with a mere $5 increase on everybody's bill would fall far short. And all those red dots and yellow dots that you saw on those former maps from our hydraulic model, those would still remain. We would make very scant progress with our capital improvement plan. And the problem with deferring your capital improvement plan till a later date, inflation continues, so that when Harlingen finally does decide to tackle that problem, those rates are going to be even higher, those costs are going to be even higher. And you're going to be in a situation where you need to undertake other projects on the master plan that are further away in time. So now you're doubling up on your projects and you're experiencing a higher cost. So that is one reason why deferring or some smaller rate adjustment on the level of a $5 plan just isn't going to get very far at all.
How will HWWS fairly determine family unit water usage charges for an apartment building with 120 units that uses a single community meter?
Well, I think there's maybe a little misunderstanding of how our rates do work. Current rates and the proposed rates, multifamily customers, apartment complexes, even duplexes on a single meter are charged as a commercial customer. We didn't mention this when we were on this slide before, but residential customers pay a block rate, but commercial customers will not pay a block rate. If you're on the low end of the spectrum on residential, you're going to be in a lower rate, but as a commercial customer, it'll be higher, but still lower than the higher end on the residential side. So if you're an apartment complex landlord, you've got a master meter, your rates will be commercial rates, and there will be no block rate calculation that you'll need to worry about. The other thing that we discovered when we started looking at the question of master metered accounts, some utilities will actually look at a per unit and assess a higher base rate if there's a lot of units. It turns out that if you have a master meter that's serving 15, 20, 30 units, you effectively pay a significantly lower rate on your overall base than you do if that would be individually metered. So it's pretty easy to say that most master metered accounts, most multifamily units are actually seeing a lower rate than if those units were individually metered.
Here, the comprehensive methodology detailing how the proposed changes align with the city's long-term sustainability goals and the equitable distribution of fiscal responsibilities among all stakeholders, including but not limited to residential, commercial, and industrial users.
When talking about the standard of how this rate study was conducted using the best industry practices published by the American Water Works Association, and looking at cost of service and making sure that your revenues or your rates are charged to customers in proportion to the cost that they incur on the system. And what this does, it prevents one customer class from subsidizing another. So I think that's probably the best answer there. But if you really want to find more details and get into the weeds, I would recommend you go to hwws.com/rates, where that 125-page draft rate study has been published. That makes them for exciting reading for sure.
How does the council plan to ensure that these adjustments do not disproportionately impact those of lower socioeconomic status?
Gone a little bit and already discussed those. Certainly there's the component where you've got a block rate and you've got those lower consumers that are paying a smaller rate than they are paying even today. And then the other part of that, housing authority customers, where a discount there is also being considered.
What mechanisms will be put in place to monitor, evaluate, and if necessary, adjust the rate structure in response to unforeseen economic variables or shifts in usage patterns that could arise as a direct consequence of this policy change?
The best way to answer this question has to do with the fraction of fixed revenues that the rate plan will generate versus those variable revenues associated with consumption. We're subject to some pretty wide-ranging weather conditions. In 1 year, we might have several tropical storms come through, dropping a lot of water. And what happens when we get that kind of rain, we see customer consumption drop way off. We ended up going through and looking and comparing all the water utilities in the valley to say, okay, at a 5,000 gallon bill level, how much fixed revenue through base charges, not the commodity rate, but through base charges, make up of the total bill for that 5,000 gallon consumption. And so what we found is that Harlingen receives about 34% fixed revenue, where all the other entities in the valleys are higher. The average is 67% fixed revenue. That means that those entities are much more resilient to those weather conditions, and they have a more stable rate or revenue profile. One of the things that this rate plan attempts to do is to bring the 34% up to something higher on the order of 50%. It's still lower than everyone except perhaps one on that list, but that is going to do some things to increase and stabilize our rates even when we do have some of those heavier rainfall summers when we would normally expect to have a lot of consumption that pays the bills.
Of the underlying factors necessitating the proposed rate increase for water and sewer services.
This really does get back to operating cost increases when we talk about chemicals having more than doubled in just the last 3 years. And we've also talked about the master plan, the capital improvement plan, where we have large costs that are compounded by the fact that inflation has really taken off. And it's a sobering reality. When we first saw that, it was really discouraging news, but the alternative to not improving our system is one where our level of service will decline, and growth in Harlingen is going to continue, and if we don't provide the capacity for that growth, that new development comes in, placing us more demand on the system, that means everybody's level of service goes down. And so we do see it in a situation where we have to undertake a fairly aggressive capital improvement plan.
Were alternative strategies for addressing the city's water and sewer infrastructure and operational funding requirements considered, such as optimizing current operational efficiencies, pursuing state or federal infrastructure grants, or implementing innovative technology solutions to reduce costs?
Well, this gets back to our search for other sources of funding for our capital projects, having submitted $191 million in project costs to the Texas Water Development Board for funding. The success that we have with that is going to allow us to reduce the rate plan, perhaps in future years. That success is not guaranteed, but we're certainly going to try as hard as we possibly can, and to the extent we're successful, our customers will see lower rates.
How has the council engaged with the full spectrum of community stakeholders in the decision-making process to ensure a comprehensive understanding of and response to public concerns and suggestions.
Well, this gets back to a lot of the meetings that we've had, but we have resources online where customers can go and find out all the details about what our rate plans are doing. And again, we do have that email address, rates@hwws.com. If you have questions, if you have comments, please submit those comments. We're going to compile them and make sure that our elected officials and our utility board of trustees have access to that information.
This is the last question that is on the paper, unless we have some other ones. Nelda, you'll let us know. Last question, what steps will be taken to continue to involve and inform the community about the implementation and impacts of this policy?
The same answer applies here, so we will also had our QR code and our website addresses, but do reach out to us. Website, rates page is hwws.com/rates, and that email address is rates@hwws.com. So that will wrap it up for my response to those questions.
Good evening, everyone. So I understand that two of you had a question that you wanted to submit, but you were going to wait to see if your question was answered by Mr. Skoglund?
That's overstating it, but about 26,000.
26,000. Water. Got 4 cities, and you have.
We have wholesale customers, East Rio Hondo Water Supply Corporation. They partly rely on our water to supply their customers. Combs and Primera and Palm Valley, as I understand, are 100% dependent upon Harlingen Waterworks supply, and so we have contracts with them. And also, Military Highway does some supplementing through contract with Waterworks.
An acreage, I'm not giving you a cat. And in my bill, it's in. If you want to do outreach, that's where I would.
We did add about sewer rates on every bill. I do want to state that was something that we did to the bill that wasn't notated. And also we have it in the lobby, and again, we have it on our website. And the 19,000 calls that we get in 1 month, they all do know, and the customer service team also directs the customer to the website as well. And we have that in the information on the lobby everywhere as well too. Anybody else that, I know that's one customer, was there another customer that Nilda wanted to make sure that there was a question that needed to be asked that was not answered? Unless you, of course, want to go ahead and take care of it through our QR code that you saw, or there's also a QR code paper that you can actually take, and we're also going to have water night, and everyone for Harlingen Waterworks will be here. And everyone's invited. There's a flyer outside as well.
Yes, commercial is going up as well. Maybe I should have explained that a bit better. Okay, so here in the block rate plan, there are 4 blocks. Here we go. We have 0 to 3,000, 3,000 to 10,000. Well, if you're a residential customer and your consumption is 10,000 or less, your water rates are going to be less than what commercial accounts would pay. But if you're a big water consumer as a residential customer, you're above 10,000 into the 20,000, to the extent that your consumption is up in this level, you're going to be paying these rates here, which are higher. Here's the current rates. You're paying $1.71, like all residential right now, but that does go up over the span of the phase-in of the 5-year plan. So, I believe.
We have everything, we have our pamphlets and everything. Linda,
Well, I think he's asking about the recording of this meeting. It's being live streamed.
It's being streamed to YouTube. Okay. No, I know, but I'm here. Yeah. I can't.
We're going to take all the questions that have been received for this meeting and the sheet that's been helping me to answer these questions tonight. We're going to publish that. So if you want the best answers, you're going to be able to find that on our website too.
Okay.
Also to say that any other questions that come in that haven't already been addressed, we're going to make our best effort to post those on the website. So it's been a high priority for the mayor, the city commission, and our board members to get the information out there. I think we've tried pretty hard to do that, but there's still an opportunity, and we would encourage folks rates at HWWS.com. So with that, another question?
My question is,
That's correct.
but there a person is charged 383.
Well, it does shift here. So this is the line. If your consumption is over 10,000, then you're going to have some of your bill, not all of it, but some of it is going to be above that commercial rate. And this starts to get into the weeds of how cost of service analysis is done, but that HWWS standard has been applied, so it does look at making sure that there's a fairness to that. Commercial entities, oftentimes, they have to use the water that they use. It's not discretionary. What you're looking at on the residential side is much more of a discretionary water use, particularly when you get above that 10,000 gallon level. Commercial industries and businesses don't always have the ability to say, well, I can use less water. It's just required. If you're a restaurant, you have to wash the dishes. If you've got a big lawn, well, and you're putting 20,000 gallons on it, you might think, oh, if I don't want to pay so much, then I'm going to xeriscape, or I'm going to convert some of my yard to, a non-green grassy area. Conservation is really an important topic. It's not been on the front burner in the Rio Grande Valley until recently, but when we start realizing that it's very difficult to see where Mexico is going to fulfill its obligations under the water treaty, I think the valley is going to be in a situation where it has to look more closely at conservation than it ever has before. And I think doing some of this with our block rate plans does achieve that, particularly when it comes to discretionary water use.
Well, that answer.
At this consumption less than 10,000 gallons on an annual average, the vast majority of our residential customers are in that category. And so there's perhaps some discretionary use, but when you see users up in this category on a residential, that's all discretionary. They have an option to not use that water. A lot of commercial businesses can't do that. They have to use the water that's necessary to support their business. So that's the best answer I can give, and I would suggest we could probably get into that in a little bit more detail if you want to meet after this meeting. We can tackle that question more directly. Oh,
Go back where
we answered questions that were submitted to us, and approached this meeting tonight not knowing whether we'd have 50 or 300 people here. We wanted to give everybody a chance, and so that's why we wanted to solicit the questions ahead of the meeting. But certainly, if there are other questions that are out there, you can submit them to our email address, and we will do our very best to answer those questions.
and then I saw. Was it never even considered?
Sure that I fully understand your question. So what I'd like to do is to get with you after this meeting, and then we can go through those questions one-on-one directly, because I think I might miscommunicate an answer to a question that you're not that you're not asking. So why don't we tackle that afterwards, and then I think.
Almost close to the.
Okay.
It made it sound like it was.
I think we need to meet offline and get into that, because I'm still not entirely sure the question you're asking, but I want to make sure that we get your question answered. So hang around after the meeting, we'll get to it. So if there's no other questions, I do want to thank everybody for coming out tonight to learn more about the proposed rate plan. To those who are on YouTube, on the live stream, if you do have any questions, we're certainly like to answer them. Any comments that you've got, we're going to make sure the City Commission, the Board of Trustees receive those. We do value your comments and input. So thank you everyone tonight for coming out, and have a safe weekend.